Ladies and gentlemen, here we are once again. If you are a conservative, listen to me good. I think that you are, in this country, part of a movement of people that are protecting child traffickers. Donald Trump is trying to cover up the Epstein files, and I think a lot of conservatives know this, but for those of you that don't know this, let me help you out. Donald Trump, not Pam Bondi, not Bongino, and where is he, by the way? Donald Trump is covering up the Epstein files. Every time we try to get the Epstein files out, he plays a game, and you conservatives fall for it. They had truckloads of files that could expose some of these elites and billionaires, potential Democrats, potential Republicans. And you guys, in my view, pretended to care about the files and pretended to care about the victims. So you're like, release the files. And then what does Donald Trump do? He puts the files on one side, and then he says, I'm going to try to get these grand jury stuff. Is not what we want. That's not the elites and all these guys that were trafficking and abusing these women. That's what we want. The truckloads of files that they have, and that the only thing stopping us from getting it is Trump, right? The grand jury, that was like a decoy, right? Because they had to request permission to be able to get it. And then even if they did get it, it wasn't going to reveal anything. That was the game they were playing. It was very obvious. But you conservatives, you let them do it. They will only continue to play these games as long as they feel they can get away with it. They did a switcheroo. Let's not talk about the files to expose the elites. Let's talk about the grand jury, which is nothing. And you guys were like, okay, well, let me tell you what's about to happen. And let me tell you what I think you're about to do. Prove me wrong. So they've been trying to vote to release these files. And they're short one vote, somebody who won their election. And also, as soon as this vote came around, Mike Johnson shut down the whole of Congress, sent everybody home, seemingly so they didn't have to vote. And then this person who is on the Democratic Party side, 'cause that's the main party that's trying to expose the Epstein files, which is further proof that you don't care about the Epstein files, because if you did, you would be like, F the Democrats, but I support them in trying to get the files out. Because if you really cared, you wouldn't care which party is trying to get the files out. You wouldn't care that, oh, and why didn't you do this under Biden? You would only care about the victims and justice and getting these sick, disgusting men who abuse these girls to get them to actually see justice. Now that the government is reopening, Mike Johnson no longer has this excuse, which really wasn't an excuse. He could have sworn this new person in, and then they would have voted on releasing the Epstein files. But apparently they don't want to vote on the Epstein files, so he didn't want to do that. There was no major backlash from conservatives. Every time there's a chance for you guys to stand up and put pressure to make sure these files get out, you guys do nothing. You can't tell me you care when your actions show otherwise, right? But now they can't play this game anymore because government's going to be back in session. So what do you think is going to happen? If they're really doing a cover-up, then there's going to be a dragging of the feet to swear this woman. There's going to be some excuse about, oh, we were out of session for a while and there's other things we need to do. And every excuse under the sun to drag out swearing in this woman while they come up with some other plan to move the goalposts to somehow buy more time, because the longer this goes along, the less you guys care about it, because it's a switcheroo. You guys never really cared about this stuff. What you cared about was Democrats going to prison. I said this from the beginning. I said, watch how they're going to distract you with some hearings and they're going to be talking about Democrats going to prison. And it's exactly what they did. They were like, let's forget about the Epstein files. Trump was like, oh, stop talking about this stuff. Then they give you some files that we already had before. Then they focus on the grand jury stuff when it's the other files that we want. Then they don't want to swear in this woman so she could vote for it. Then they shut down, well, before that, they shut down the Congress so they don't have to vote for releasing these files. Now the government's open. Now it's going to be something else to drag feet on, right? And then it's going to be a little bit tricky. And actually, this stuff is already happening. Well, the first thing was Mike Johnson, they had like a briefing, and for the first time ever, he didn't take any questions, right? So we who say that Trump is covering up the Epstein files, right? We're saying, look at how suspicious they're behaving. And they've been dragging all the government's clothes, whatever. As soon as the government's about to open, all of a sudden Mike Johnson doesn't want to take any questions. And we're supposed to believe that conservatives are so stupid that they don't see what's happening. That you see this behavior and you're not like, okay, they're covering up the Epstein files. Like, come on. I know like some hardcore MAGA people are stupid, but the average conservative is not that stupid. You know that they're covering up the Epstein files. You just don't give a damn, right? All you care about is your political opponents being charged and potentially going to prison. That's what you want. So that's what we're about to see. Instead of focusing on getting these files out that have been dragging, and the longer they drag it out, the more time to delete stuff and mess with stuff, right? And that's the other thing. If you really cared about it, you would be freaking out because you know. I remember, I'll tell you a story. I dropped off my car some years ago to have it repaired, and the mechanic ended up being a maniac. I don't know what it was. I asked him some question and he got upset. and he started cursing and yelling and screaming. But then this guy had possession of my car. And I don't know what the circumstances were, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get the car back then. And I felt so uncomfortable that a guy that was such a freak and yelling and screaming and just out of control, that this person had access to my vehicle that I'm supposed to drive and feel safe in, right? The same paranoia that I had and fear and concern and anxiety that I had is how you guys should feel about the Epstein files, knowing that clearly there's a cover-up going on. Maybe you don't think it's Trump, maybe you think it's Pam Bondi. Someone's trying to cover it up. And the longer that these files are in the hands of people who might be covering it up, the less likely that we're ever going to see anything. Maybe by the time the files get out, so much stuff has been redacted, removed, deleted, destroyed, right? If you really cared, you guys would be blowing up the phones of all of your Republican representatives, right? Donald Trump would be terrified right now. Instead, he's having a blast. He's grinning and he's doing parties at Mar-a-Lago and goofing around and sending memes because he's like, my followers are dumb as fuck. They don't care about Epstein. All they care about is the Democrats. So he pushed Pam Bondi to go do these indictments. So now we got these indictments. Now they're going to be talking about subpoenas and whatever. And let's try to get Obama and whatever. And they're going to bombard you with that, right? Meanwhile, again, no Epstein files, and there's not going to be no revolt. The only way that these elites can get away with what they did is if American conservatives continue to give the Republican Party the green light and the thumbs up, saying, we don't give a fuck. You don't want to release the files, we don't care, right? If you're going to indict these Democrats, great. We don't give a fuck about these Epstein files. That's the message that you're sending. So the conservative movement in America has now become a movement of protectors of child sex traffickers. That's not hyperbole. That's not me exaggerating. That's what's happening. Again, the only mechanism protecting these elites, like Clinton and whoever else did whatever on that island, is the right-wing movement. Because these politicians will only do what they feel they have to do. And the fact that you guys don't seem to care, there's no major backlash, right? No one's making threats. Remember when the election stolen stuff, people were like, we're not going to vote based on, if you don't fight back or whatever. There's no threat. No Republican is feeling like, man, if I don't push to release these files, I'm going to lose my next election, right? So that says you guys don't give a fuck. So based on that, you're giving them a blank check to cover up the Epstein files. And guess what they're going to do? You gave them this as far as the cover up. That's exactly what they're about to do. And I'm sorry, I got to put 110% on you guys. Because contrary to what liberal media wants to tell you about everybody's afraid of Trump, nobody's afraid of Trump. Nobody gives a fuck about Trump in terms of people in power. What they're afraid of is you. They're afraid of the voters. Trump has such control, like the Pied Piper, over the voters. So that's why it may seem like they're afraid of Trump, but they're not afraid of Trump. They're afraid of the voters. Because if they upset Trump and Trump has such control over the voters, then he can turn the voters against them and then they lose their elections. That's what they're worried about. So the reason that the Republican Party feels so comfortable to just be playing games and lying and, the files, I don't need to, we're going to release it. Yeah, we're going to release stuff. The reason they feel comfortable is because they see their voters don't give a fuck, right? But if the voters were like, listen, we're not going to vote for you if you don't put these files out. You want to see how quickly a bunch of them start revolting against Trump? They care about one thing, power and money. And they don't get it from Trump. They get it from you. If you guys turn on them saying we want these files out, you're going to see how fast those files come out. It's that easy. So you could disagree with me or whatever, but if what I just predicted happens as I told you, what you going to say then? Government's about to open up. Let's hear how many excuses they can come up with. And it's not the first time. They've been doing this. They've been doing it. Every time we try to get the files, there's some excuse. Finger Paul, Pam Bondi, what's she doing? I told her. Trump has full control. You saw them No Kings protest? That's what they're talking about. The entire Congress is subservient to this one man. Nobody will stand up. Well, it's like 2 or 3 people. But overall, they do whatever he wants them to do. Pam Bondi do whatever he wants her to do. If you're not getting Epstein file, there's only one guy to blame. You can't have this one guy running this whole show with everything else but the Epstein files. But with the Epstein files, Pam Bondi. No, it's the same guy who's been doing, you're going to do tariffs. Is it legal? I don't care. Like the courts are like, no. He's like, I'm going to do it anyway. The same guy who's been doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. Not listening to courts, not listening to Congress, not listening to anybody, not even his voters. He's the same one that's blocking these Epstein files. And the fact that most of you were debating in the beginning whether he was in the files just shows how you're not even thinking. Why wouldn't he be in the files? He was good friends with Epstein. How are you going to have an investigation? Think about, normally you wouldn't think this way, but because you're really the ones with the Trump derangement syndrome, you're not even thinking clearly. What are the situation with the person who was friends with the target for 10 years is not in the files. So imagine that I am a drug kingpin, right? And the DEA comes after me. And I have a friend for 10 years. In what world is my friend's name not in the files multiple times? If they're investigating me, that means they're investigating people that's close to me. Why wouldn't Trump be in the files? So just the fact that you would even think that, like, oh, he's not in the files. You're not thinking straight, man. The question is not whether he's in the files. We know he's in the files. He's got to be all over the files. They were literally getting the girls from Trump's place of business. How on earth would he not be in the files? The question is, why is he in the files and what do the files show? But again, the fact that in the beginning of this, you guys were like, oh, he's not in the files. He's obviously in the files. So is anybody else that was close to Epstein. Clinton is in the files, right? Anybody close to Epstein is in there. But I'll tell you, there's nobody's name that's going to be more in there than Donald Trump. And I think we got some reporting that that's what they found. The guy who goes in the little girl's locker rooms, talks about his daughter's breasts, who has parties alone with him and Epstein and young girls. What do you think they were doing in those parties? If you want to be the movement that protects child predators, then keep silent. Keep trying to change the subject and talking about what the Democrats should have done, blah, when right now the Democrats are the only ones pushing to get those files out. Keep playing stupid.